Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Our first story is a bitter reminder of the entitlement some carry and the lengths they'll go to assert it. But it also showed the importance of holding your ground even in the seemingly trivial matters of daily work life. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Guess I was too stupid to know any better. A bit of background. I've worked in the service industry since I was 16, and it's a place where you will see the absolute worst of humanity. Seriously, people can really suck. I have loads of stories of entitled a-holes, but not that many revenge stories. This is one of the times I got my revenge and some manager couldn't just override anything I did. On to the story. When I was 18, I worked in the restaurant section of a big multi-story department store. For the Brits here, it was a Debenhams, a kind of middle-class clothing/homeware department store. During the weekday afternoon, it was quiet, so there was usually one server and one supervisor. In the quiet times, I'd do some deep cleaning, and today was the day that the fryers were to be emptied and cleaned. My supervisor was in the office doing rota, so I was out front. I would serve drinks and cakes and make food when it was required. Enter the D-bag. Probably early 30s with a toddler on the hip, about 2 years old. He picks up a sandwich and I ring it up, asking whether he'd like drinks, etc., and he asks me why the deal wasn't on. Our afternoon deal at the moment is to add a packet of crisps and a drink for an extra 2 pounds to any sandwich. Did you want the deal added on, sir? No, the deal to add the portion of chips to any sandwich for 1 pound. Now, I'd been there for about 8 months and I'd never heard of this deal. So I kindly informed the man that we didn't have this deal, and he went from 0 to 10 in the blink of an eye. He started shouting at me, telling me how stupid I was for not knowing about the deal, how he'd get it every time he came in, etc., etc. In between the ranting, I asked when he last got his deal. He told me last year. I didn't really know what to say at this point, so I went to get my supervisor. My supervisor was a nice guy, but he was a pushover and hated confrontation, so while he spoke to the customer and was rated for hiring a stupid young girl, me, I could see my supervisor was going to crumble. While my supervisor worked on the till to try and find a way to add some chips for a pound, the customer started to talk to his toddler. What a stupid girl for not knowing about Daddy's deal. Don't worry, son, I'll never let you work in a crappy place like this. I'll make sure you get a good education so you're not stuck in a dead-end job with the IQ of a walnut. I'm at the other end of the counter listening to this, getting incredibly PO'd. Never mind the fact I was in my first year of uni and had to live at the same time. So as soon as I hear my supervisor telling the man he'd found this deal, I went out back. I had ready everything to deep clean the fryers, so I opened the valves and emptied out all the oil. By the time my supervisor came to the kitchen to tell me to put the chips on, I was already squirting the cleaning agent into the empty fryers. The look of horror on my supervisor's face made me feel a little guilty, because now he'd have to deal with the guy. But then again, he didn't stick up for me and gave this guy a deal which we weren't even supposed to do, all because the customer was a man-child. The guy howled like a banshee when he was told that he couldn't have the chips. I was in the kitchen listening, happily scrubbing the fryers. The guys threatened to have all our jobs, and he did write a letter of complaint to the store manager, but we didn't get told off because this deal wasn't active in our system. Guess I was just too stupid to know that chips needed fryers. Damn my lack of education, huh? People like that make me so angry. He knew full well it wasn't a deal, and he knew that he'd get his way. I guarantee that as a child, if he didn't get his way, he'd throw a tantrum and his parents would let him have what he wanted. Now as an adult, he thinks it's acceptable behavior and acts like this all the time. Even worse, he's teaching his own child this abhorrent behavior. And our second story. I work here, boss, but I don't work here. Years ago, I worked part-time as a student for a certain car manufacturer. They gave me a work uniform which was fresh but unmarked and not much else. I added a clipboard and several new pins to my work uniform because I heard other students got fired for bad writing and crimping up all the documents, unable to be digitalized and fed into their system. My job is simple. If the car rolls towards me on the conveyor belt, I rearrange the cables in the correct position, make a note on my clipboard which part and car I had to rearrange, and that's it. So I kept going at it for weeks, often for 8 to 10 hours a shift, and the workers knew my face by now. The only person I had only seen once was a big, fat, bald man in a suit. I was told he was the manufacturing hall boss of this plant. One day, the conveyor belt stopped for an hour, but instead of sweeping the ground, as I usually do to not look idle, I took the clipboard and pretended to take notes, when a big bald man rolled up on me from the side. "Boss, you there, come with me." Confused but calmly and collected, I pointed at myself and stood up to follow the red-faced creature that was screaming as loud as a passing train. "Boss, who else could I mean? This way, now!" I followed him while he stomped down the belt line as if in hope to magically get it back to running. Then he abruptly stopped. Several workers I knew looked in surprise and curiosity what a simple student working part-time could have done to enrage the boss of the manufacturing hall. He then explodes into an endless tirade about technicalities and parts not fitting. Since I'm polite, I only tried once to interject how he got the wrong guy, but since he'd interrupted my attempt, I'm forced to expand on the boss's wording, even though I didn't want to, but because I like you guys, I'll comply. Enjoy this malicious compliance, only special edition, made only for you, dear Redditors. "Boss, shut up while I'm talking." So I just did. Stood there and smiled to show him I was listening and he had my full attention. Hard not to. This went on for at least 6 minutes. I remember because I snuck a peek at the timer on how long the belt line had been standing still. "Boss, did you get all that? Are we understanding each other? Get on the phone now and call your boss about the replacement parts. This'll be on you." Me. "Sure thing, boss, but I don't know your number. Also, I don't work in this sector of the manufacturing hall." Boss, visibly confused. "What do you do here?" Snickering workers in the background. Me. "I turn the cables in the proper position and take a note of the part where and whenever this was necessary. I'm a student part-timer." Boss. "Oh, okay." Walks away as if in a daze. Addendum. 2 weeks later, they stopped extending my contract and I returned to my studies. According to a worker I kept in contact with, my part-time workplace was involved in some drama as the person they hurriedly hired just copied my documents and left for several hours. He didn't rearrange the cables to ease the workflow of the workers down the line, so someone silently bled for that. Worst of all, he created duplicates for days in their system and a few thousands undocumented parts. A regular conveyor belt worker had to sub in there and then and add that work to his regular work until they hired a new student weeks later. The clipboard's an old social engineering trick. You can walk into almost anywhere with a clipboard and people won't question it. And our last story. The fight for the lake against the HOA. Not my story, but worked at a law firm that was retained by a guy fighting his HOA. Basically, his HOA surrounded a lake, and so the members had access to use the lake. And if you thought HOA land rules were absurd, you've never dealt with an HOA on a lake. There are some reasonable rules regarding what you can and can't do on the lake, and when you can and can't do them. Some rules are reasonable, some a little less so, but nothing crazy. But after this guy bought his place, he started using the lake for wakeboarding with his family. This was not prohibited. At least it wasn't when he bought the place, but then the HOA quickly added wakeboarding to the list of prohibited activities. Apparently, this HOA is made up of folks who've moved there full-time and like peace and quiet, and he was effing their crap up. He wanted to fight the rule change, and we looked for every procedural loophole and every legal loophole, looking into legality of prohibiting certain activities on water, etc., and we determined there was nothing we could do in this case. He was pissed, but what are you going to do? Then we get a call months later. He'd received multiple citations for violating several rules pertaining to wakeboarding and for towing multiple people behind his boat. A couple citations isn't generally a big deal, but the type of citations he received and the number of citations he received meant that he would lose his lake privileges for at least a year. So that's a problem, but not as big of a problem as the fact that he wasn't doing any of the things he was cited for doing. In fact, he didn't even receive the citations in person, but in the mail. Someone had sent to the HOA screenshots of security footage that showed a boat towing multiple people and wakeboarding, and they claimed it was the client. The HOA took this anonymous people at their word, did no further investigation, and simply sent our client these citations. Problem is, these photographs weren't of our client or his boat at all. Client tried to rectify the problem on his own, because why waste money on a lawyer to fight something you shouldn't need a lawyer to fight in the first place, but they refused to deal with him. We reached out to the HOA and HOA security, who yelled at us repeatedly to kick rocks, to explain that the way the client received these citations is in violation of the HOA rulebook. According to the rulebook, at least our interpretation of it, a citation for boating violation must be given directly by the security officer on duty who witnesses the violation. We found out that the security officer who officially signed and issued the violations wasn't even working on the days of the purported violations, so we said, based on how this is going down, anyone can report anyone for anything, and without investigating, a security officer can simply retroactively issue citations? Further, we had evidence that these photos were not and could not be of our client. Our client wasn't even in the area on the day of 2 of the violations, which we could prove through his own photos with timestamps and metadata and his E-ZPass records. We also wrote a demand letter stating that if this went to an appeals hearing, that we are entitled to offer up evidence in our defense, and that as such, we were demanding security footage of the lake at the time of the violations. Everyone at the HOA tried to hardball, but we eventually looked up who their attorney was, contacted him, explained the situation, explained that our client really does not want to cause trouble or incur any more legal bills, and we wanted to resolve this as quickly and smoothly as possible. To his credit, he quickly recognized how bad the HOA had screwed up and was continuing to screw up, and told us to hold off on doing anything. Wouldn't you know, the client got a notification in the mail a week later that all violations had been rescinded. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.